Hello and welcome to the 8th webinar in the Heritage Science Academy series of webinars in 2022. The Heritage Science Academy webinars are an activity coordinated by the IPERION Heritage Science Project and by the European Research Infrastructure for Heritage Science. My name is Matija Strlič and I coordinate the Heritage Science Academy itself. And it's a particular pleasure today to introduce Dr. Jana Kolar, who will be speaking on evaluation and monitoring of ESFRI infrastructures. So a topic of deep interest to many of us involved in the development of research infrastructures. Just to say that the webinar is being video recorded, but there will be an opportunity to ask questions throughout the webinar, which I will read out at the end, and those will not be video recorded. To say a few words about our speaker today, I suppose she needs very little introduction, but anyway, Jana has a very broad range of expertise, ranging from policy development and implementation, research and innovation, and entrepreneurship. She was Director General of Science and Technology at Director General of Science and Technology at Ministry of Slovenia, Chairman of the Board of Slovenian Technology Agency, and a member of the Governing Board of the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. She was also a member of the High-Level Group of Innovators for a European Innovation Council, which advised the Commission on how to strengthen support for breakthrough, market-creating innovation, and of the ERA Council Forum in Austria, a high-level expert body advising the Austrian Minister responsible for science and research. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Jana, today, and I hand the screen over to you.
Thank you very much, Matija. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Interestingly, in the CV, you have not mentioned that we have co-authored more than 50 papers throughout the past. So it's a pleasure to be here. Today's talk will not be about heritage science, but about monitoring of ESFRI infrastructures. If someone in the audience is not familiar with ESFRI, ESFRI stands for European Strategy Forum on Research Infrastructures, which is a strategic body composed of national delegates and European Commission, and its task with coherent policy making in the field of research infrastructures in Europe. And of course, monitoring is one of such activities. Now, ESFRI is best known for its roadmap, which is published periodically, which is a list of research infrastructures at European level. And then at several countries, most of European countries, have then created, following the ESFRI roadmap, national roadmaps, which contain several of these ESFRI projects or landmarks. And in this way, ESFRI has, during the last 2 decades, come up with an investment agenda of almost 25 billion, pooling the resources across European Union, which is largely considered a huge success, which is unparalleled in other domains. But let's now go to the topic of today, which is performance monitoring. Now, performance monitoring is quite often an obligatory activity for many publicly funded bodies. There's a good reason for it. First of all, it's a very good way to monitor progress towards the objectives and thus see how certain organizations are performing. The results enable evidence-based decision-making, also on the future developments. The results also contribute to the communication of achievements. So as a research infrastructure, when you do your monitoring, it's easier for you to communicate to your funders what you have achieved over the past years, which is important for your sustainability. And then it also contributes, for example, partly to impact assessment, simply because some of the indicator impact assessment is also partly based on the data, which are also contributed through the performance monitoring. But not only, we'll come to this at the end of this presentation. Now, considering the importance of performance monitoring, particularly in public sector, which we are discussing today, Competitiveness Council have asked ESFRI to develop, in 2018 already, to develop a common approach for monitoring of performance of infrastructures. And it also invited European research infrastructures on voluntary basis to include key performance indicators in their governance and based on this, ESFRI has decided to develop this monitoring framework. And there were a couple of considerations that we have made already in 2018. First of all, we have a huge diversity among the RIs. It is not possible to have a simple measure that will accommodate everything that they produce. Then there's very important that the involvement of research infrastructure that there's the involvement of research infrastructure throughout the development of the framework. The ESFRI has also decided to support research infrastructures with a set of proposed KPIs. So we had a task group, a working group, which worked hard for more than a year to propose some of the KPIs which could be applied quite broadly, but they are not a must to be adopted by each of the research infrastructures. They're voluntary. You can opt to use them or develop your own. It's also important that KPIs are not enough. There's narratives and the context that needs to be added in addition to the KPIs to the monitoring framework. And we are aware that research infrastructures are monitored on a number of levels. They are likely to monitor the progress of their development themselves. Their governing board may require a different kind of monitoring. Their governments may require, the funders may require monitoring or organized monitoring. So we would like to bring together, when such information is available, simply base ESFRI, incorporate it in the ESFRI monitoring in order to minimize the burden on the ESFRI landmarks. So the objectives of the ESFRI monitoring are the following. First of all, this approach will enable us a regular exchange between ESFRI and landmarks. We will be able to monitor the quality, see the progress, learn from where research infrastructures are, and learn about their needs. Also, in this way, it will be possible for us to identify the problems and support the landmarks to overcome these problems. In addition, monitoring will also allow insights into the functioning of the research infrastructure ecosystem in general in Europe, which for ESFRI is very important, and it will involve it will feed into some other activities, such as, for example, ESFRI landscape analysis. Now, these were the starting comments about the approach. Now, since 2018, we have come a long way. We started with 2018 when ESFRI was mandated by the Competitiveness Council. And we have organized, in blue, you have the workshops with research infrastructures. We have organized 2 workshops on monitoring and on the validation, then followed by the validation workshop on the monitoring of research infrastructures. And this fed into the working group report on the monitoring of performance, which includes ESFRI KPIs, which are also accompanied by the reference lists, which explain in detail what certain KPI is used for and how it's calculated. Then in April of this year, we had the proposal for the implementation of the monitoring, ESFRI monitoring approach, which in addition to the KPI framework, looked also into the monitoring process itself, which was followed by a workshop. And then in September, just a few weeks back, we had a presentation of the public guide of monitoring, and we're ready to start. So you can find all the information that and the reports that I was just reviewing on the ESFRI dedicated webpage to monitoring. Now, how we will go about ESFRI monitoring. First of all, each landmark shall be monitored at regular intervals of about 5 years. That's quite ambitious because we have a lot of infrastructures and the number is growing. It will be limited to landmarks. Now, monitoring will be based, first of all, well, not first of all, but on all of the following. Information gathered through a questionnaire, quantitative information, which will be represented by KPIs, hearings with the panels, and if the panels decide so, site visits. So not necessarily in all cases. Now, first of all, a few remarks on the questionnaire and then on the KPIs. Regarding the questionnaire, it will complement KPIs with narratives and also context. You will also be able to include some context. The questions are quite general and allow you to present yourself in the best way, in the way that's most suitable for your research infrastructure. This comes back to the fact that we acknowledge that there's a huge diversity among research infrastructures. Since the questions address the basic dimensions of research infrastructures, you will, in most cases, have the answers ready. So it will not, we do not expect that it will be a very tedious and laborious exercise, hopefully. And the questionnaire will allow you to submit additional information. So the documents that you will consider relevant for the monitoring. And then a few remarks on key performance indicators. They shall support the whole monitoring exercise. They shall indicate the development of your infrastructure over a sufficient period of time. So hopefully, for the first infrastructures, it will be at least 2 years, hopefully. But so my advice to all research infrastructures, which are to be monitored now or in the future round, please prepare the research infrastructure, the key performance indicators early. And this is for 2 reasons. First of all, it will take a few iterations before you end up with the right KPIs. You design your framework, you see what's working when you start collecting, and when you exchange with your governing bodies and with your members, and then you upgrade them. And then for the ESFRI monitoring, you will need to have already a timeline. So no time's too soon. So I would urge you to start with this process as soon as possible. Now, KPI shall be designed following the ESFRI report. It does not mean that you need to take the ESFRI indicators. You're welcome to, but you need to follow the concept. For example, the RACER criteria, to be explained on the next slide. And the KPI shall be individually adapted to your RI. So the ESFRI approach to KPIs, I mentioned already a couple of times during this talk, but this is really a core to the approach of ESFRI, so it's important to mention it several times. You are very different. You need to be able to design your own KPIs. However, there are certain principles that you should follow your KPIs. Selecting KPIs is almost a highly professional work. It requires a lot of knowledge. So what we have put is in our report is a simple recommendation to follow the RACER criteria, meaning that the research, all the KPIs should be relevant, meaning that they should be linked to the objectives of your research infrastructure. What do you want to achieve? They should be widely accepted by the staff and your stakeholders, credible for non-experts, unambiguous and easy to interpret, easy to monitor, so that the data should be, if possible, collected at low cost, and robust, so that they could not be manipulated. And of course, you have different kind of indicators. Performance indicators are typically input activities and outputs, which are linked to your activities. When we come to the impact indicators, outcomes, and particularly the impacts, they're no longer linked to your activities. They are derived by, for example, third parties and similar. So some objectives, when we thought of how to design this, I mean, we had a quite ambitious task ahead of us when we decided to develop some KPIs which can be used broadly by very diverse research infrastructures. Because infrastructures are diverse, KPIs should follow your objectives. So basically what we did is to look at the ERIC statutes, not other research infrastructures, because ERIC statutes are more uniform. So we could look at ERICs, look at their objectives. We made an overview through all of the statutes to understand what are the most common objectives. And here what you have is, for example, what is there on training? What do different research infrastructures say about training among their objectives? And we could see that, for example, in training, we could come up with an indicator which would cover most of this. And we looked also at the other objectives. And this is how many ERICs share a particular objective. So scientific excellence is shared by everyone. Education and training by half. Facilitating regional and transnational cooperation in Europe by 70%, innovation and knowledge transfer by 70%, fair data, 60%. This was in 2018. I can imagine all of the ERICs which are funded now have something about fair data. Outreach to public and policymakers by 70%. Scientific support to policy and standards, 60%, international cooperation, 45%, governance, management and optimum use of resources, 40%. So looking at this, we have a pretty good basis of coming up with by KPIs, which are shared by at least, for example, about half of different research infrastructures, which is a good basis. Now, let me just mention that for all the research infrastructure projects, which are aiming, for example, to be an ERIC, this document, which is linked in the monitoring of research infrastructures performance report of ESFRI from 2019, is useful because you can see what are the other ERICs are saying. What are the typical objectives of the ERICs? And it's useful when you come up with your own proposed statutes. Now, we have, going through these objectives, we came with 21 proposed ESFRI KPIs, which you have in the report, and each of them is accompanied by a reference sheet which explains what are the limits, of a particular indicator and how the data are collected and reported, also periodicity if it's needed. So these are the KPIs that ESFRI expert group came up with. Now, let's now come to the monitoring process. Within ESFRI, we will start now, already this year, with the first round of monitoring of landmarks. First of all, only landmarks which are at least partly operational and obtained their status in 2016 or earlier will be monitored. And this is, of course, because you need some time also to start to gather the data on the KPIs, of course. This round of monitoring will be done in 3 batches till the end of 24. And after each batch, we will review. We will check if all the if some of the procedures should be changed, and we will make an amendment because this is a self-learning framework. And after the first round, we expect to review the process. This will be after 3 years. So after the first round, there will be a more intensive review of the process. The first batch will contain the infrastructures that you have in this sheet, where you also have the operational start. And you can see that while some of them became operational, obtained their landmark status in 2016, they were only operational since 2019, which is 3 years. Now, who's responsible? We will have 2 bodies, monitoring panels, which are several bodies, but it's called monitoring panel, 1 for each landmark. And this will be in charge of the monitoring process of each of the landmark. It will be composed of the members of the strategic working groups, digit working group and implementation working group, external experts, and each one will have a chair from one of the members of the panel. And then there will be high-level ESFRI monitoring committee, which will oversee the whole process. And it will be composed by all of the chairs of strategic working groups, implementation group, digit group, members of the EB and delegates of ESFRI, and EC representatives. And the timeline is as follows for the first batch till 15th of September. So the approval by the forum of the first batch is expected by 15th of July of 23. And the first lessons learned and minor adaptation are expected at the next forum meeting in September. Now, what will be the consequences? You might consider this a very relevant part of the information. Now, why is ESFRI monitoring? What's the rationale for ESFRI monitoring of research infrastructures? We are not funders. So it's not that we will stop funding, but we do award the landmark status to the ESFRI landmarks. And if they're not performing, that can be taken away. Now, first of all, ESFRI does not intend to remove landmarks from the roadmap in this first round. Some research infrastructures might receive some strong suggestions on what to improve. And if this is not done, the landmark status may be reconsidered in the next round. Now, the purpose of the monitoring is, and this is where I started, is for the landmarks to improve themselves, for us at ESFRI to see how you're progressing and to see whether we can help you in this process of improvement, if we can register some problems, and if we can help in solving these problems. At the end, it should contribute to the sustainable and efficient research infrastructure landscape in Europe. Now, just the last words that will be dedicated to impact assessment. Now, it's important to note that performance monitoring is not impact assessment. Now, ESFRI monitoring, it's not even meant to do the evaluation of socioeconomic impact. Although some KPIs that you may have, and also some of the ESFRI KPIs, are on the impact side. But that doesn't mean that we will do the socioeconomic impact evaluation. We will collect, if possible, from you, your impacts, the ones that you have registered through your own processes. And we will need this to understand how you're performing, what impacts you achieve, but also we will use this for communication purposes. This will also contribute to your own sustainability. So for socioeconomic impact, a different approach, different methodology altogether is needed. And ESFRI is currently preparing a draft report on socioeconomic impact analysis where we will examine various approaches. And there are various approaches. There's no right approach. We will look at the various approaches. We will identify good practices and elaborate guidelines for the uptake by national and regional governments, but also, for example, for research infrastructures. We also aim to identify the types of impacts observed by research infrastructures in their socioeconomic impact assessments. Again, so that we learn more about what are your impacts, and so that we can also promote your achievements. We are in this together. I started by saying that ESFRI has an ambitious 25 billion euro worth investment agenda, mainly invested by member states and partly also by European Commission. These are really significant funds which comes with significant responsibility. And the society needs to know what is achieved with the funds. And this is, for me, all for this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jana. If you could advance to the next slide, please. Just for us to introduce, or rather to invite everybody to attend the next webinar as well. This will be held on the 8th of November, and Cecilia Bembibre from University College London will be talking through the topic of olfactory heritage, an introduction into an innovative and interdisciplinary research field.